when I saw that Latin VFR came out with the baby bus, or the A318, which is the smallest out of the A320 family, I was pretty excited, especially for this one. This is a special aircraft. This is the British Airways only 318, or I should say was, and they did a very special flight with it where it was all business class. So I believe it sat around 42 people, 36, 42, somewhere in that range. And it flew from London City Airport, which is where we're sitting at today, and it would go to Shannon for sort of like pre-customs, and then it would go to JFK. Now, it was lucky enough and privileged to have the honor of the call sign, the flight number of BA-001, which started off with the London to New York flight. What it's really known for is for the Concorde. So for this little guy to have such a special, sort of unique configuration and choice of flight, can you imagine getting in this thing and there's only 30 people on board and it's all business class, and you get to be a pilot of a very historical flight number. So we'll go ahead and jump on into the cockpit, and we're going to do what I typically do on these first flights, which is a quick and dirty startup, get in the air. We've got a flight plan loaded in from SimBrief. I've configured the weights from that as well. It's a relatively short flight, I believe. Overall time is roughly around an hour and 20 minutes. So we will get started up. I have a feeling this guy trying to taxi off the runway is going to stay in our way. But we'll just pretend he's not there and fly through him. We are on live weather, but not live time. I moved the time to have a little bit more daylight. The other thing, before we actually jump into the cockpit, this is the Marketplace London City Airport, which they've done a fantastic job of. If we speed up the camera here a little bit, just want to take you around really quickly to show off some of the details that they put in here. It's got the nice entrance here, buses lined up. It's got where the tube runs through, and then the long terminal down. I really wish that there was a way to make it so that general aviation aircraft wouldn't park at gates. I think there's software that you can get to do that, but it is relatively annoying. Hey, our guy disappeared. The other thing that I believe is different now compared to what is in the flight simulator, to taxi out here, you do have to kind of go down and back and turn around. Well, in the real world, looking at aerial imagery, they have added in, and you can almost see it in the textures here, that is actually a taxiway down. They built it out even with this little jet out. So, little inaccurate there, but that's okay. I imagine that was an addition at some point, and this is how it used to be. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump on into the cockpit of this wonderful aircraft. All right, so here we are, cold and dark. And I like to go through and do these very simple startups. I'm not going to go through or intend to even make this be a checklist, a thorough checklist. This is just going to be firing us up, getting us in the air. We're not going to use ATC. And I'll go over some of the quick things that I do in the A320 family. Now, speaking of that, this is the default cockpit for the A320. So it's the same as the default Microsoft version. That is pros and cons. So pros, it's very simple to use. Cons, it lacks a lot of functionality. I think this was mainly done for Xbox users, as it will transfer over nicely. And the price point of this aircraft is very low. So that is obviously going to be a pro as well. Now, the Latin VFR A319, which is the next size up from this one, they eventually Fly-by-Wire did come out with their mod for it, I believe. I haven't downloaded it yet, but I believe I saw that it is available, which I imagine they will for this one too, which will add a lot more functionality and usefulness to this aircraft because it is pretty bare, but that's okay. So to get it fired up, we do have external power available here, but we're just going to go ahead and use our APU. So in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and just switch on our, sorry, we got to get our batteries on first. That will help. Turn on our fuel pumps. And I'm going to get those. Sorry, I got panel switches here. And we're going to turn on our beacon light, and we can turn on our nav light as well. Now, this overhead panel, this is all your external lights, internal lights. I'm going to brighten it up in here just so it makes it a little bit easier to see. Typically, I would not fly with the overhead on. It's just too bright. You can see how bright it is now, but I'll let you guys see the cockpit a little bit more. These little dials here turn up the backlighting on the autopilot panel. This is your autopilot panel. And then down here you have your backlighting for your center console. And then you have a floodlight here, which does the entire sort of under there up by your PFDs. You can also use this little guy here just to do sort of the pilot side and co-pilot side. So there's one over here as well. So I tend to use those more than the full floodlight. If I use the full floodlight, it would be, maybe one notch on with the overhead turned off. But we're going to crank everything today so that way you can see it a little bit more. We also have our PFD lighting here, so we can go ahead and just crank those all the way up. This is inoperable. On here you have your side stick. I would just like to give that little wiggle. Obviously you have your pedals down there. This is your sort of like nav stack, your MCDU, which is going to be all of your configurations for the flight. But let's go ahead and just get this fired up. We're going to use our APU or auxiliary power unit. So we have the master switch on. We're going to hit the start button, and we have to wait for that to become available. It takes a couple of seconds to come on. You can see our battery was starting to drain there. You can see that coming back up as the APU is working. You're going to hear things starting to come alive. And there's the AC turning on. So now we're available. So now we can turn on our APU bleed. Coming down to our center console, this is our engine startup. We can go ahead and turn this over to ignition, and we'll just fire up engine 2. What we're looking at here is what's called your N1 and N2, and this is really your two engines. And N1 is basically the outer fan, which we mainly pay attention to. And then this obviously is going to be the other side of the engine. You can hear that spooling up nicely. Now you can start both at the same time, I believe. I am not 100% on that one, but we're just going to do one at a time here while we go through our MCDU settings. So let's go ahead and come down here and have a quick look. Typically you would start the engines up during pushback, but we are just getting things going. So anyways, go to our init page. You can see we do have our from and to. If you see this in orange, it means you need to add that in. So we're taking off from London City and we're heading over to Shannon. Our cost index, though, our sim brief profile mentioned that it was going to be 16. So we'll go ahead and pop that in. Then we can come over to the next page. I don't think there's much that you can do on this one in the default A320 cockpit, or in this case the A318. So we can just skip over that one. If we go to our perf page, though, let's go back here. Perf. So now here's our takeoff sort of section. Now, or phase, I should say. Now, this I don't believe is the same as in real life, but what you would typically do is hit like, okay, we were going to be taking off with flaps 2, so you go 2 and hit 2, and then you'd be able to click your V speeds, and well, maybe it's working. Let's see here. Go back to 0, 2. No, it's not. So what you would want to do is your flap handle is right there, and so if you go down to 2 flaps, because that's what we want to take off with, it's relatively short and steep takeoff here at London City due to being so close to the city. So now that we actually have that set, if we hit our speeds, you can see the reference speeds update. We are running very light today for a couple of reasons. We're only going a short distance, and also this version only carries a max of 36 people. So I did configure it as being full, and then added in an alternate and added in a little bit of extra fuel as well to help with the center of gravity because we are so light. So that gets our takeoff phase done. Next phase is, we're just going to leave everything as managed. As we come over to our approach phase, we're going to pop some of this stuff in as we come in to land. Now, I've been having a hard time landing this thing using really the autopilot function. It all the way to the ground, I should say, using the auto throttle with full flaps. It tends to go too slow, adjusts the trim to almost 100%, if not 100%, and starts to oscillate. And then when you disconnect your autopilot, it will end up sort of like basically stalling. So I'll describe that a little bit more when we come into approach, but it's just something to be aware of. I'm also going to just go ahead and set our altimeter there. I did that with the shortcut key. Let's go ahead and turn on the terrain map, which is down there. And sorry, I should have been having engine 2 starting while we were talking there. And we're pretty much set to go. We can go ahead and turn on our taxi lights. Those are set. Wing lights we don't need on yet. Nav and logo is on. We can go ahead and just put our landing lights into off, which is basically having them hanging down. Let me see if I can get over to them. Where are they at? Here. There they are. So they're off, but they are, flipped down. So once we turn those on, they don't have to come down. You can see how bright those are. And typically you wouldn't do this until you back up a little bit, because if we come back into the cockpit here, you'll see that we turn off that guy. I think that will, let's see. Nope. Because you have 3, oh yeah, it did. It turned off those 2. So we could turn that back on though. Basically that's this main taxi light here is above where the sort of wheel turns. Turn this on, and then you're going to have 2 more beams that will sort of focus where that front wheel is turning. So that's the difference between those. Typically you would just have that on when it's at nighttime, and then we also have a takeoff lights to give us even more lighting going on. So let's go ahead and get our pushback going. We are all fired up and good to go. I'm going to go ahead and pop our parking brake off, and we can hit on the PC is just Shift P. We'll start that pushback. It looks like we got someone taxiing there. CFE. I'm not sure what CFE, what airline that is. I always like doing that when I'm flying these, is to turn on the nameplates really quick to have a look to see what airline it is, and then look it up to watch it in real time as well, just as a way to sort of pass time in these. So one thing I didn't talk about, which we'll go ahead and do now, is our autopilot and setting this up. So we are going all the way up to 38,000 feet. Now, since we're not using ATC, this little inner knob will change you from 1,000 feet to 100 feet, all of the feet. So you can dial it in that way, or you can tick it over and just do thousands of feet. The other thing I want to do is, I know the speed restriction here is going to be at 220. So we can go ahead and click over into selected mode and then just take that all the way up to 220. There we go. So we are good to go. We'll talk a little bit more about takeoff procedures once we get down and line up. You can see that guy's turning around, so we're going to have to wait for a little bit. So I'll wait until we are holding short to talk about pre-takeoff and then takeoff. All right, so here we are, held short of runway 27. We're going to go through a couple of things just to confirm that things are set and talk about our sort of game plan here. So we want to make sure that our autopilot is set. Right now you can see that there isn't a dot or a dash next to our altitude, and that's because I was messing around with our vertical speed knob here. So if you come over here, you can actually start to change your vertical speed. Now if we click back into altitude manage mode, it'll do our climb out as the MCDU has set for the performance. So typically you'll leave that in for ascent. Descending, I will typically swap over to selected mode. We also want to make sure that our flaps are set, which we're at flaps 2, which is what we configured for our these speeds, or our reference speeds. We want to make sure our ground spoiler is armed too, so that can go up and down. Once we take off, we'll disarm it. The last thing is we do have auto brakes, which we'll talk about once we get lined up. And really, that's all I kind of do besides checking to make sure lights are good. Actually, we can turn off our APU now. We don't need that on anymore. And we want to make sure that our landing lights are now actually out, and we can go ahead and pop on our strobe light as well. Wing lights are for checking to see if we have ice build up, which in this aircraft you can actually see the wing. Some of the larger ones, instead of this baby bus, you cannot see the wing. So we are sort of configured there. Let's go ahead and roll on out. Now, something I didn't talk about before, if I can fix that, I do, is taxiing. You don't really want to go over 40% N1. Looks like we got someone going missed. We got someone behind us, so I'm holding people up. Apologize. So taxiing, yeah, you just want to kind of keep it under 40% N1. I'm going to go ahead and line up here and hold short. Well, not hold short, but just hold for a second. And what I was talking about with the auto brake, which is, I don't think necessarily a bug, I think it's a limitation of Microsoft Flight Simulator, where you can see here's your auto brake. If I try and arm it right now with my brakes held, it will not let me. If I let go of my brakes, it'll let me. But as soon as I touch my brakes, it goes off. So the problem with that is that I can't, for takeoff, you need to actually spool up to 50% N1, let things stabilize, and then go. You release that and then come to toga. Now, problem is that I can't arm my brakes. So there's workaround is you can use your parking brake and not your toe brakes. Personally, what I like to do is still hold with my toe brakes, and then once I release after stabilizing at 50%, is that I will just arm that and advance to toga. speaking of toga, we'll go over your throttle quadrant really quick. We have toga at the top, which is, it stands for takeoff go around. That's basically full throttle. Flex, we won't really go over. It's when you have a certain temperature set in there to kind of trick the MCDU settings. And then CL, which is your climb gate or your auto throttle, which you will reduce down to once you're 1,500 feet above the ground. So before we hold this guy up any longer, let's go ahead and get this into practice. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down our brakes. I'm going to go ahead and get this up to about 50%. Let that stabilize. There we go. So I'm going to release the brakes, come to max auto brake, and then advance all the way up to toga. Now for takeoff, we're going to rotate at our rotation speed, which is very low because we are, like I said, light. So we're already coming up to it here. So there we go. At 119, we can go ahead and rotate. Now you want to start coming up at around 3 degrees a second. Positive rate of climb. You're coming up. And we can already bring in that autopilot, which is what's nice. So let's bring that in. And we can bring our first notch of flaps up. And the reason being is we do have this very strict departure, which you can see there. So that makes it nice and easy for us to steer clear of downtown London. Yeah, as you can see, we're going over, and now we're just coming up to about 1,500 feet there, so I'm going to go ahead and come back to our climb ident. Right, so now we're in there. Great. And really, that's it. I've already raised our flaps all the way up. I was paying attention to our little ticker tape there. So since we're running so light, that all happened very quickly. Really, we could have done flaps 1 on that one. I'm used to the aircraft being a little heavier. Alright, so let's talk about descent. So we're coming up to Slaney, and Tipper is about 90 miles away. Now, a general rule of aviation is the rule of 3, which is to get a glide path of 3 degrees, which is to take the amount of altitude that you need to descend. So we're at 38,000, and we need to go down to 8,000 is what Tipper is. So we need to lose 30,000 feet. So that would be 90 miles out, which we've already passed. Also, that does not account for speed reduction as well. So we're going to have kind of an aggressive descent. I started this a little late. For some reason, I thought we were at 32,000 feet. So what we want to do is we can go ahead and get our altitude set down to 8,000 feet. I got a little dial that I'm rolling in physical form. So we're down to 8,000 feet, and you can see we're starting our descent there. Now, what I tend to do for this portion is get a little bit better control over what I actually want us to descend at. Now, you notice we're kind of bouncing around there as things are trying to slow us down, because we are, trying to get that to cooperate, if you will. So let's see if we can get this out. I don't know why we're climbing like that. Oh, I'm an idiot, that's why. So we want to come over here and do minus. So we're even going to have a more aggressive descent here. So we're going to start coming down. We want to hit 8,000. If we want to slow down even more, you can introduce speed brakes. I should have disarmed that after takeoff, but I didn't. So if you wanted to put it at 50% to start slowing us down, it's totally fine. You can do that. And that'll sort of try and keep us closer to our purple arrow there. Once we get even lower, it'll be switching over to descent mode, which will move that purple arrow down even further. So there is calculators to use online as well. We're going to have to do a little bit more of aggressive descent to get there in time. If you just Google like descent calculator aviation, there's some that come up where you can put like, hey, I'm at this altitude, I need to go down to this altitude, I'm doing this speed, this headwind. All that sort of stuff gets taken into consideration. Your start speed down to what you want to finish at. All of that can be calculated, and it'll give you your feet per minute in order to get down there. We can also look. I wish there was a more information, which I think the fly-by-wire can give it to you. So it's saying we're going to arrive at 2:57 at Dipper. So we've got 9 minutes, and so that would be at 2,500 feet per minute. We're looking at, is that like 20,000 feet? So not enough. A little over 20,000 feet. So we can increase that descent rate to get us down there a little bit quicker. And also we can start to slow the aircraft down if we wanted to. We could come over, let's put it back into selected mode, and we can say, hey, let's start to slow us down. And with those, you can see we've come throttle idle. We've got our speed brakes on. It's going to slow us down even more, which will give us more time to get there. So I figured I'd take a moment to talk about the textures of the aircraft and how it looks overall, and also take a little visit into the cabin. Now, overall, I'd say it's good. There is some issues with it. Some of the textures are a little low quality, and then there's a lot of clipping that happens. And what clipping is where like one part of the aircraft pops through the other. So you can see a little bit already on the nose right here, these little dark areas. That's actually down to the cockpit coming through the exterior model. And as we get closer, you'll watch they'll kind of disappear at certain angles. So there they go, they're disappeared there, but then you can see there's some of the cabin and cockpit clipping up over here. And then as you come around, you can see now on that side we have the other side of the cockpit clipping through, and it'll eventually disappear. So, you know, not a big deal. I mean, when you're out far, you hardly notice it, but it is there. So, not great attention to detail, but for the cost, not the end of the world. You do get a lot of liveries with this, which is great, because I think the marketplace is flooded with livery packs that, well, they're nice to have. Really, I think Microsoft should just put them in a separate category. I digress. But overall, the outside is fairly well. This is the same story with the A319 that Latin VFR made, where there's just sort of like odd things where you have really high textures mixed in with really low quality textures. So for example, like the door here, you've got these nice crisp clear fonts, but then that push here is all blurred out, even though it's technically the same size, right? So a little weird there. Things like the rivets don't line up in certain places, stuff like that, but all minor details. Overall, the sound package is unique. I think it shares it with the 319, which would make sense because these are the CFM engines. And then, yeah, just overall, I'd say, like a 7 out of 10. Not bad, but for, we're not paying $60 for an aircraft here. So don't expect $60 attention to detail. This is a great way to get into the baby bus and have some fun flights. Let's go ahead and check out the cabin. So once you're inside the cockpit, now I'm just using an Xbox controller to walk around here. This is, like I said before, the default A320 cockpit. So there's no difference here. This is all the same. Now, if we go back into the actual cabin, you can see, and this is the same with the 319, that we do have some added detail, which is nice. So you have the little galley here with their monitoring equipment, stuff like that. Nice thing as well is that, like I said, this is a very unique British Airways flight that was set up for business class only, and they did make it for business class only. So you can see it's got, it's a 2x2 setup versus a 3x3, and they get their own nice monitors on everything. You have the British Airways moniker on the partition walls, but just it's nice that they modeled it in to be in this way. Man, she looks nervous. So I like that they did that. Not that you're going to spend much time back here, but it is nice that they added in the details of making this actually just full business class. Now, it's not perfect. As you can see, the beacon light does flash through, which is very annoying in night flights. That happens in a couple other aircraft as well, not just unique to this. What is unique to this, though, is same again, that sort of like lack of detail of, you can see this partition wall is not even close to the cabin wall. It's got this big old gap on it here, which I just don't understand how you don't center that up. This side's better, but still not lined up. And there's a few like small little gaps here and there, but like you're not going to spend a lot of time back here, so it's nice that they did it. Things like that just seem lazy to me, but what do I know? I'm not a modeler for flight simulator aircraft. Then back into the cockpit here, you can see it is a nice place to be. Microsoft did a great job on the textures in here and the lighting and everything. It looks really well done. Okay, so we are hitting the last point on our actually tipper was the start of the approach, but you can see the constraints are listed there, so that's why we're down at 6,000. The next one is at 3,000. But what I'm going to do now is actually turn over to our localizer setting here, and I was going to turn on the LS button to make sure that we are configured here. Now you can see we're already at, like, the glide path is really getting picked up this far out, but we're going to go ahead and descend now down to 3,000 feet. So let's go ahead and drop that down. And what we're wanting to do, this is really, I want to see what the squiggle is all about. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click us on to approach mode once I see that the purple arrow is coming in, and that should take care of us actually lining up. So we've got Shannon off in the distance over here. We're descending, staying really with the glide path at this sort of descent rate. Now, there's a couple things that I found with this aircraft, that we are on the approach now. We are, once we get in a little bit closer and we start to introduce flaps, it'll adjust our speed for us. So, like if I go to manage mode right now, it's going to slow us even further down, which is fine. We're not in any sort of landing configuration here, but it is slowing us down to 180. And that's really down because we're just so light. It's not wanting us to stay up. Now, well, it's wanting us to stay up at the speed up. Now, the issue that I have found is, I'm keeping an eye on this purple arrow as well, by the way. This is going to be our localizer here. When I see that start moving in, I'm going to click over to approach. There it goes. Boink. Let's see if it actually turns us over onto it. It looks like it's going to. We'll go past it a little bit here. And then once we catch up to that glide slope, it'll be following that as well. So I think by doing that, we're skipping this little weird hook that was going on by clicking on the approach just beforehand. I'm not sure what that was all about, but we're gonna line up with that. Now, what I found is, so for example, if we go ahead, we're gonna introduce our first notch of flaps. You can see that it's actually speeding us up from our descent. So it's configured a little weird in there right now, but we're at 1 notch of flaps. You want to have, before you go to the next notch, these little sort of equal sign, the sort of yellow equal sign there. You want to be at or below that before you introduce the next notch of flaps, which we are at, so we're going to go ahead and do that now. You can see that the speed reduces even more. So we're now at flaps 2. This is doing its thing to get us lined up. We've captured the glide slope right there. You can see it's in green, GS, which, you know, honestly, we're a little bit further out than what is on the charts, but that is fine with me. And we can go ahead at this point. Really, we're 10 miles out, around 5-6 miles out or so. We'll lower the landing gear. Now, what I have found is that flaps 3 is too fast, and flaps full is far too slow, and the trim goes all out of whack, and the auto throttle is chasing it up and down, up and down. So I end up going into managed speed mode all the way down to the ground to really get the angle right, versus letting it stay in managed mode, because it does some weird things. So if you're having issues with coming in and it feeling like you have to, like, it's the auto throttle is constantly spooling and then, you know, trying to basically keep up with that glide path, that'll be the reason why. Is, I don't know if that's a bug or if that's you know, accurate with the way this autopilot works. I very much doubt it. But let's see here. We are 7 miles out. We got our landing gear on. We're going to go ahead and set our taxi lights on. We'll leave that one off, though. Got a little bit of rain coming in, which, of course, I would imagine we would, being in Ireland with these little bits of low cloud layer. You can see the rain spots, which is very cool to see. All right, there we are. We just passed 6 miles, so I'm going to go ahead and bring our gear down. And we're going to go ahead and come to flaps 3. Now, there's not a huge difference between flaps 2 and flaps 3. But if we were to go full flaps, it's a huge difference, and I don't know if that's accurate or not. So, for example, I can go ahead and click it on now, and I mean, it's down there. I mean, way down there. Still dropping. I mean, it's got us below 100 knots. There, it's coming up. It's about 95 knots. There's no way. So I go to manage mode. We're going to, or in selected mode, and we're going to try and keep this around 130, but we can go to full flaps though, which we already at. So 1,000. Now the way we're going to land this, we want to make sure our auto brake is armed there, and our speed brake is armed. Keeping auto throttle in. Wind-wise, we've got just a very mild sort of quarter crosswind there, but everything is looking very nice now. Now, as we touch down, right around 200 feet, I like to disengage the autopilot. Around 50 feet, you're going to think about your flare. 30 feet, you're flaring. Not huge. And then you're going to let the throttle come to idle around 20 feet. And then you're going to pop it into into reverse thrusters. You don't need to fully engage them. I'm going to pass 200 here in just a second. Oh, we got someone taking off there. So disengage an autopilot. Come over a little bit. Not touching the throttle.
60, 50.
There's 50.
40, 30,
Flaring.
20.
Bring it idle.
Retard. Drive.
And I've got the reverse thrusters engaged, but I'm not using them. I'm letting the auto brake do its thing and the ground spoilers do their thing. So we can come out of that now. We can go ahead and turn off auto brake, bring up our flaps, and then bring our ground spoilers back all the way up. And there we are. All right. There we are. We can go ahead and pop on our parking brake. And shutting down, really what you'd want to do is we can pop on the external power, and we're going to go ahead and we can turn off our nav lights, retract everything here, turn off our taxi lights. And the last thing you want to do is you keep your beacon on until everything is shut down. Shutting down is as simple as really turning those guys off, and everything's going to spool down nicely there. So once those are completely off, we can turn off our beacon, which lets the ground crew know that the engines are off. If they see that very bright beacon going, they are going to stay clear of the aircraft. So letting that come down, we can go ahead and pop off our seatbelt sign. Jetway, not sure if it'll let us connect it or not. Let's see here. Ground.
Shannon, ground Speedbird 001. Could you please connect the jetway to the aircraft?
There we go.
001. The jetway is going to
And so now we can turn off our beacon as we are fully shut down. So with that external power, we still have all our sort of like air going and everything being, still lit up. There's our master letting us know that the cabin doors are open. And let's go outside and have a little look. There it is connecting. And here we are in Shannon. I always find it funny that they have this back one open up, but it is closed off. So, is this worth it? I'd say yes. I think particularly though, just because of this specific variant and the cool story. I mean, really behind the whole 318 is a cool story. It's a shame that it took the turn that it did of Really, I think 80 were made, and there's not a whole ton in service by airliners anymore. And that this one carried the unique configuration of the cabin of business only, and also the flight number of 001, which is historic for British Airways in itself, and for the fact that they decided to give this little baby bus that flight number is, I think, stands. I mean, it's in the history books, right? One thing that I did learn about British Airways recently is that, their call sign for ATC is Speedbird, and I always thought that that was because of the Concorde. Well, it's not. It's actually their original logo, which is still kind of present in their sort of like flag, but was of a speedbird, kind of like an Art Deco-y speedbird, of a bird flying very fast, and that's why they are called Speedbird and not British Airways, and not because of the Concorde. So, a little fun fact there to close it out. I hope you enjoyed the flight. I've enjoyed flying this. I will probably do a full flight where you stop here, refuel. I might go the other direction, though. It's starting JFK and come all the way to Shannon, and then Shannon to London City. But until then, thanks for joining me, and I will catch you next time. Take care.